We're clear for takeoff on 3-6 left. Holy shit. About a year ago, I found this super cool video on YouTube of this guy that designed and printed his own CRJ-900. The second I saw that video, I knew it was something I wanted to print and test myself. If you saw the previous video on my channel, that plane was printed solely so I could learn how to print an RC aircraft. It was all in preparation for this moment. The first thing with any 3D printed projects is to print the parts. So I started printing these parts. It took quite a while. I would guess it was around 120 hours of print time, not including the parts I had to reprint because I'm stupid and didn't put things together correctly. Once I had most of the parts printed, I started assembling. I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about assembly in this video. The designer has an excellent build video that walks you through each step. I'll drop a link to that in the description. The aircraft that I'm going to be modeling is SkyWest's 604 Sierra Kilo, which is a CRJ-700. Troy's plans are for a CRJ-900, but he says if you want to make a 700, all you have to do is remove fuselage section 3. So that's exactly what I did. It did prove to be a little difficult to set the CG, as you'll see a little bit later in the video. Let's get back to the build. I followed Troy's instructional video, so I started with the tail section of the aircraft. Now this is somewhere I wanted to put a nice little detail piece in. You can see that the APU exhaust has a metallic finish to it, or as I like to call the APU exhaust, the planus. I don't have a fancy 3D printer that can print multiple colors on the go, so to print the planus, I told Kira to pause and purge the filament at a specific layer so that I could change out the filament type. This ended up working pretty well after a few tries. I used this same technique on the nacelle anti-ice feature on the cowls. We'll get a better look of this later in the video. Once the planus piece was finished printing, I was able to glue it in place and then glue the horizontal stabilizer to the vertical stabilizer with the wires fed down through the middle. After this, the rudder was installed and a control check was done before moving on to the fuselage. The fuselage for the CRJ-700 is 10 pieces, or for the CRJ-900 it would be 11. To put the fuselage together, you're going to build 3 sub-fuselages and then glue them all together at the end. This is to ensure that you can feed all the wires from the rear to the forward of the aircraft where the avionics bay will sit. Before gluing the fuselage sub-assemblies together, the nose section of the fuselage has to get the steering servo as well as the retract for the nose gear installed. I have to say I am pretty impressed with how smooth this whole operation is. On the tail section of the aircraft, we do have to mount our Dyson hairdryer engines. The designer provides files for both 64 and 70mm EDFs. I chose to go with the 70mm because who doesn't want more thrust? To finish up the engines, all that was left to do was to assemble the outer nacelle and install the exhaust nozzle. Once that's done, we can start assembling the fuselage. I was a little worried about the rigidity of the fuselage, but when all the pieces get glued together, it's super strong. So far, I'm really impressed by the design of this aircraft. Now the fuselage is assembled, we can move on to the wings. The designer allows you to build wings with or without a carbon fiber tube that acts as a wing spar. I wasn't sure if it was necessary, and then I found this video on YouTube.
Well, maybe the spar would have been a good idea.
Holy shit! So I put the spar in. I really struggled to put together the wing root. The tolerances on these pieces are super tight, so I kept breaking the vase mode that kind of puts everything together. I had to reprint the wing root parts a few times just because I kept breaking them, but once I finally got everything to go together neatly, the rest of the wing was easy to assemble. Printing the control surfaces was also tricky. He gives you files to print the flaps and the ailerons either connected together with a support structure in the middle or by themselves. I found when I printed each individual flap piece by themselves, I got weird layer lines and shifts, whereas when I printed them together, it came out as a very nice print. However, you do have to separate the 2 flaps using a razor blade, and a lot of times I would end up scrapping the part because I was in a hurry. I would recommend printing the pieces together, and then take a razor blade and do multiple light passes to ensure that you don't cut through the actual flap surface. Do as I say, and not as I do. Next was to install the landing gear. It comes with some files to print your own strut. I printed mine out of PETG, but then quickly realized that this wasn't going to be nearly strong enough. Using my hard landing simulator, I then gracefully removed the old struts. I ended up cutting the struts that came with the landing gear and then drilling a hole for the axle pin. This seemed to be quite a bit stronger. Every good project has fire involved, right? I wanted to add nav and position lights onto this build. To make the holes for the LEDs, I used the torch to heat up a metal punch and then melted the plastic while checking the fit for the LEDs. This actually worked extremely well. These wingtips are pretty fragile though, so be careful when moving it around or print the part with a few extra layers. Now that the wing was completed, we can move on to my least favorite thing in the world, painting. I masked off the bottom of the fuselage to get the rest of the blue I needed. However, you can see in this shot that I failed to mask off where the wing mounts. This resulted in a visible overspray that you could see from the outside of the aircraft, so if you're going to paint the bottom, make sure you mask that off. Once the wing was painted, we could then attach it to the fuselage. I did have a little bit of bleed through under the tape that I used to mask off the wing, so I fixed it with some of this pinstriping that I found on Amazon. It doesn't look perfect, but it looks pretty good. At this point, I put the gear down and set it on the shop table so that I could get all the wiring put together and figured out. Then it was time for a test taxi. The taxi test went well other than having to lock tight the set screws on the main landing gear and the nose gear strut. The last thing I wanted was the plane to veer off into the dirt on the takeoff roll on my maiden flight. Now was the part that I was most excited about, putting the decals on. I feel these decals from Cali Graphics really bring this plane to life. I cannot wait to see this plane in the air sporting the 604 Sierra Kilo colors. It's gonna be awesome. Introducing the all-new 3D printed CRJ-700, equipped with retractable landing gear for optimal cruise performance, vertical and horizontal stabilizer because planes need them to fly, and everyone's favorite, navigation lights so it looks festive around Christmas time. Utilizing 2 electric leaf blowers to keep you cool, these bad boys can take you where you need to go at the speed of Mach Jesus. Enough room to fly 70 of your friends and the other 3 crew members you dislike the least, coming to a 3D printer near you.
Cell call. Cell call.
It is test day and airliner day here at the beautiful Walsburg Model Airport. Today we're going to be testing our CRJ-700 in the SkyWest scheme, as well as the Delta 737 AL-37 by Freewing. Feel free to check out that video. The wind's going to pick up here in just a minute, so we're going to go ahead and get some batteries put in her, and hopefully we won't spread microplastics from here to Salt Lake City. Ladies and gentlemen from the flight deck, this is your captain speaking. I'd like to welcome you aboard SkyWest Flight 6969. Service from the Walsburg Airport to the ground out your left window. As you can see, we're flying on a plastic jet that was made on a 3D printer, so in the very likely event of an emergency, please follow the directions of your flight attendants. Welcome aboard! On the taxi out, I did a control check to make sure all my control surfaces were moving correctly. I'm no stranger to maiden flights for home-built airplanes, but I've worked really hard on this. Hoping it was going to come back in one piece, all that was left to do was to line up with the runway and send it. We're clear for takeoff on 36 left! Holy shit! Yeah, motherfucker! You're up? Dude, this thing's awesome. Look at that. Holy shit, this thing is cool. Right now I'm in high rates, which is just as far as it'll go. It is very touchy. I'm gonna try mid rates. That's much better. My blood is pumping. I put so much work into this thing. We're gonna have to do some EET training on this. Push, roll, thrust, stabilize! I spent the next few minutes flying around and just getting a good feel for this airplane. I also wanted to get some pretty cool drone shots so that I could show you guys just how awesome this thing looks when it's flying through the air. Overall, I actually really like how this plane performs. This is my first time flying a swept wing with EDF jets, and I gotta say, it was pretty easy to fly. Surprisingly, it was easier to fly than the AL-37 I'll be testing in my next video. This plane is not for the beginner though. I would consider myself a solid intermediate pilot. Anything less than that, and I think you would have a hard time simply because it's just so fast. How's that shot? One more and then we're gonna bring it in for a landing. You know what? I think we need to bring it in now. At this point, the plane didn't seem to be performing the way that it was earlier. I was concerned about my battery life, so I thought it was time to bring it in for the thing I was dreading the most, the landing. Gear down. You got it? Look out! Oh no! I ran out of battery. Don't listen to that guy. That guy's a fucking idiot. Why don't we let the professionals explain what happened? Hi, it's me, that fucking idiot. To really understand this crash, we gotta break down each individual element into pieces. So let's start with setting the CG as well as my battery choice. In this flight and in the crash, I used two 2200 amp hour batteries, but to make the center of gravity work, I actually had to add 2 ounces of weight all the way into the nose of the aircraft. That ended up giving me a flight weight of about 3,300 grams. Originally, I wanted to use two 3,300 amp hour batteries to try and extend my flight time. However, if you can see in this shot, those two batteries weighed 673 grams, whereas the two 2,200 amp hour batteries and the additional weight only ended up weighing 483 grams. That was a difference of about a half a pound. I was already concerned about weight, so I decided to go with the lighter option. Whoa, 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 we're not done breaking this down. We gotta talk about my shitty piloting abilities. First of all, when I went to go around, I had already flown for way too long, depleted my batteries, so when I pushed that throttle up for a go around, the plane came about that far up off the runway. I didn't have sufficient power. Then you can see in this shot that I had a pretty substantial left crosswind, and I didn't correct for it at all. The next shot, right down the line, this shot, you can see that I way overcorrected this aircraft. I put this plane into like a 90-degree bank, the wings lost lift, the nose dropped, and the rest is fucking history. It's important to know this plane crashed because of an event of critical errors and not the design itself. I really enjoyed building this plane, I learned a lot of new skills, and I feel I became a better builder because of it. In the end, that's really all that matters to me. If you're considering building this plane, I really can't recommend it enough. It goes together fairly smoothly and really is a joy to fly. I thought it flew better than the AL-37 I tested later that day. You can check out my build and test video of the AL-37 on my channel if you're interested. The good news is I was able to put everything back together with some super glue and a little bit of packing tape. If you want to see this plane fly again on heavier batteries or want to see me build and test something else, leave a comment. Anyways, we're about out of time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, hit the like and subscribe button. It lets me know my content is worth watching and shows how I can improve. Until next time, blue skies and tailwinds, my friends. They've got porta potties over there. It's like they know this is gonna be a shit show. Get out of here, Fog!